King Jr., stand up.
I have the pleasure to present to you
Stand up for justice, stand up for freedom, stand up for righteousness.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And I will be with you always.
Martin Luther King was one of a long line of Baptist preachers.
This is where it all began, the Ebenezer. The Black church had the central role in the social fabric of the Black community.
We had a small black and white television, and we saw the scenes of what was going on.
I refuse to accept the idea
If you're willing to speak truth to power, then you have a cross before you.
that mankind is so tragically bound
And he saw himself as bearing a cross.
to the starless midnight of racism
You cannot choose the ministry. It has to call you.
and war.
There's always a Calvary for those who speak truth to power.
This opposition has often
King put all of us on notice to find the courage and integrity to do the right thing.
My mom, Coretta Scott King, she often said, I didn't just marry the man, I married the mission.
Go out with that faith today.
Some white citizens were threatened.
You have to move through a wilderness with prodigious hilltops of evil.
Many resorted to violence.
Go back to Philadelphia, to New York, to Detroit and Chicago with that faith
The
today.
whole objective was to instill fear.
Move on with dignity and honor and respect.
But Dr. King became a prophet
And nothing can be more Christian.
of love, justice, liberation, and reconciliation.
The universe is on our side in the struggle.
You can't want for your enemy what they want for you and expect things to change. Somebody has to cut off the chain of violence.
Dr. King's faith was inextricably linked to social issues.
He always asked the questions that unified people.
We cannot hate in response to hate.
It was detrimental to my faith to sit by as people are oppressed. You gotta act.
I don't want to live in a country that denies its history. I want to be in a place that recognizes where we are, but also imagines who we want to be.
We are part of something much larger than ourselves. And I think a resurgence of faith that's centered on love would change the world.
Good afternoon. On behalf of our CEO, Dr. Bernice A. King, welcome to today's beloved community talk, presented with Better Together, the King Center's Interfaith Initiative. We are so glad you are here today. As you are joining in, please take a moment to share where you're viewing from as we build community in this moment and want to welcome you with love in this space. This BCT, or Beloved Community Talk, will explore the moral and spiritual imperatives to challenge global militarism, drawing inspiration from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s seminal speech, A Time to Break Silence. We will discuss the role of faith and moral power in advocating for peace, examine the ethical responsibilities of individuals and nations, and consider strategies for collective action against militarism. As you have seen in the intro videos, there are some exciting things happening at the King Center, and we invite you to join in and stay engaged and visit our website at thekingcenter.org for more events to come. Some great things are happening. And now allow me to present our moderator for the evening, Dr. Vanetta L. West. Dr. West is a cultural consultant, a leadership strategist, a nonviolence educator, and learning experience curator known for her subject matter knowledge in the areas of neighboring well, the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the connection of faith with good works, justice, accountability, and community building. Now we present to you Dr. Vanetta L. West. Dr. West, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Damien. Such an honor on this day especially to be guiding this conversation on behalf of the King Center and Dr. Bernice A. King. I want to thank everyone who is joining in this moment today as we commemorate the 59th anniversary of Dr. King's speech, A Time to Break Silence, and the 58th anniversary of the day he was assassinated. We want to do that in this time together today with a conversation, a very vital, critical conversation on a time to break silence. A time to break silence, faith, moral power, and the crisis of global militarism. That sounds like a lot in one topic, but what we're going to do here in this beloved community talks experience is pull all of that together, pull out some key points, share some key themes with you, and talk about some things in a way to help us move forward and to clarify what can we do right now with our faith, with our moral power, in the interest of eradicating, lowering, decreasing, starting to really challenge global militarism. And everybody can do their part. And so we want to get right into this conversation and introduce our very special, all of you all are special who are tuning into, panelists, starting with Shane Claiborne. Shane Claiborne is a part of this work. I want to say that about all of the folks joining us. They're a part of this work. When I think about each of them, I think, wow, what great folks to have be a part of this conversation, because they are talking about this, they are doing this, they are leading initiatives that galvanize us around action from a moral core. And so Shane is doing that work, talking to people, training them on how to turn weapons in his community and around the nation and world into constructive things, taking guns in Philadelphia and other cities and getting them burnt down to the place. I think burnt down is the phrase. Shane, you share more with me later, into tools that are useful. And in what we're doing in this conversation, that's our thinking. He's also built a community space in Philadelphia for people to join together to plan and collaborate. So we want to welcome our friend, Shane Claiborne, leader, founder of Red Letter Christians as well. Hello, Shane.
It's so good to see you, Dr. West. Good to be with all of you, especially on this holy day. And thank you for organizing all this.
Oh, thank you. That's Pastor Damien and a great team, but I'm grateful to be a part. Thank you, Dr. Bernice A. King. We also have joining us Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, leader of the Skinner Leadership Institute, founder of the Skinner Leadership Institute, who is trying to galvanize us again around our moral responsibility to pray for our leaders, regardless of political affiliation. What's our assignment? To pray and to intercede for those who are in leadership positions in this country and across the world. Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner.
Thank you so much, Dr. West, and good to see you, Shane, always on the battlefield for justice. Thank you for being here, for my being here.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much. We also have joining us Reverend William Barber, who's a key leader right now in the movement to end poverty in our nation, but to also connect poverty to war and to militarism, those Kingian triple evils that we often share about, that Dr. King spoke about. And so Reverend William Barber, he has so many titles, Bishop, Reverend, Doctor, has been leading Moral Mondays in our nation, a very critical movement every Monday, one Monday out of each month. They're in the streets. And one of the things that they're talking about right now is this phrase, war is not holy. So Reverend Barber is doing this work as Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner is doing this work, Shane Claiborne. We want to welcome Reverend William J. Barber.
So glad to be with Dr. Skinner, William Skinner, Claiborne, Shane, and Dr. West. And I want to tell you that all of our folk with the Center for Public Theology and Public Policy at Yale for Divinity across the nation are joining in today. We're streaming this out. So I'm just honored.
I saw that, sir. You're streaming it on the Repairs of the Breach website as well. I saw.
Yeah, pushing it out to about 100, 200,000 people. And just tell Bernice, anytime Dr. King calls, we try to answer.
Well, listen, she's on her way in.
I know it.
Our final guest is actually not a guest. She's always telling me, thank you for having me on. And I'm like, thank you for having you on your own show. We laugh about that. But Dr. Bernice A. King is the CEO of the King Center, the daughter, youngest child of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Mrs. Coretta Scott King, founder of the center, and certainly is one of the leaders right now across the globe in continuing to teach the world about Kenyan nonviolence, not just as a tactic for social change, but as a way of life, and is speaking and sharing in such a way to help raise up a new generation of nonviolent leaders and foot soldiers. And so we want to welcome to a King Center platform, the CEO of the King Center, Dr. Bernice A. King.
Well, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
I'm always honored to be on our platform with you, Dr. West, and I'm delighted to have my brothers and sister in the gospel ministry here tonight as we tackle this very timely subject. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. King. And certainly, as we get started with this conversation, one of the things we do want to absolutely do is extend our prayers and our thank you to the King family. We don't want to start talking without saying that we realize there's been a sacrifice.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And so on this day, whenever I think of you, I think we're commemorating, but this is a woman who grew up without a father. And so we want to honor the King family. Thank you for continuing the work. You know, some of us would have just stopped and went on home somewhere, but y'all keep doing this work, and we appreciate that. We appreciate that on this day that you are here with us having this very important conversation. Thank you. Thank you, and we're praying for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Listen, we're in a conundrum across the globe with militarism. I think we can just frankly start there, everyone, and say, as we're looking at bombs being dropped on not just what people are calling civilians. Anybody else struggling with the term innocence? People are saying we're trying not to kill innocents. And I'm wondering, even as we start this conversation, how did we determine who was innocent and who's not? And how is that one of the things that really pushes us into war, this notion that we can determine who should die and who shouldn't? And I think as we just consider that notion and go into this conversation about what Dr. King said 59 years ago, how it resonates today, a time to break silence. And our first question is just around that. What is this moment that we're in, that we find ourselves in? And that's a human-made moment. How do we truthfully name this moment in history? I think that's a good place to start. What do we do with this time that we're in? Everybody's watching today. We invite you to share in the comments, however you're watching, how do you name this moment? And what does moral clarity require of us right now? We want to start with you, Dr. King. What does moral clarity require of us right now? What are we called to do in this moment? And I want to just simplify that a bit, starting in our own thinking, so that it gets us out of saying, what are other people doing? What do you think this moment is requiring for us to do with our spiritual being and our morality?
So let me just first start by saying, I think we're at a crossroads of nonviolence and non-existence. My father talked about that so much, but I think it's even more real today. And he gave us an admonition when he said we still have a choice today, nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. And he went on to say, this may well be mankind's last choice to choose between community or chaos. So I think more clarity is making that choice, choosing obviously the high road of community, choosing the pathway of nonviolence, standing always in truth, upholding and fighting for justice, protecting democracy, and especially human dignity. Human dignity at this moment in time is at stake across the globe through various things, whether we're talking about wars or just lifting up the whole triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism together. So I think, each one of us has to make a choice. If we really want to coexist in a world of nonviolence, if we really want to see the beloved community, then we have some hard choices to make in this season, not to sit on the sidelines and be comfortable, not to watch everybody else who may, in our mind, we may think are the ones that are assigned, whether they be a faith leader or a political leader or a corporate leader. We all have to make the choice because we have influence, and especially today because of social media, so many of us have influence, and we can lean in with that influence, ensuring that we're speaking from love-centered places and standing in truth and protecting the lives of so many people, and that the attacks that are happening on the human dignity, on humanity itself, is so important in this hour.
Thank you, Dr. King. Shane, when you consider that question and what Dr. King just shared about human dignity, how would thinking more about human dignity and considering human dignity and what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called this world house, help us have more moral clarity in this moment?
Well, thank you. And, as I think of the moment that we're in, it's a moment that demands extreme courage. And I think of, Dr. King saying these are extreme times. The question isn't whether we're going to be extremists, but what kind of extremists are we going to be? And we quoted your dad yesterday, Dr. King, when he said traffic lights are good things, but when a fire is raging, the emergency vehicles go through the traffic light at top speed to try to save lives. And that's what I think this moment demands of us. I was arrested yesterday along with a couple dozen other people, clergy, faith leaders, Ben Cohen from Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, all kinds of young people that were there. Hundreds of us gathered outside of Lockheed Martin, the biggest weapons contractor in the world. And we blocked the entrance of that with the names of the children. And Dr. West, this is why I think it's so important, is that we say human beings made in the image of God are being killed by our government and by the Israeli government right now with arms that are made right here in the United States. So the old saying goes, if we want to stop violence, we got to figure out who's profiting from it. So we blocked the entrance of that. And when the judge said, why would you go to jail for this? We said, if you knew someone was making a bomb that would blow up a school, wouldn't you do everything you could to stop it? And so I think we all have to ask, what does courage look like? It has a whole lot of different forms right now. But for some of us yesterday, it meant putting our bodies in the way of this weapons contractor that has literally made millions and millions, billions of dollars off of the destruction of life. And one of the people who worked there for 30 years joined us. And he said, when September 11th happened, his coworkers said, after 9/11, this terrible attack, they said, we all just became millionaires. So we have to name that this is an entire military industrial complex. And we've got to do all that we can to stop those that are making a killing off killing.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you. Dr. William Skinner, in your work, you seem to do, and I've been inspired, just learning more about your work to compel us to care for our leaders. And I'm wondering, as I hear, care and pray for them, as I hear what Shane just shared, how do we, with our leaders, in this time where we need moral clarity and to respect human dignity, honor human dignity, and courage, call our leaders not out, but as Dr. Bernice King always reminds us, in and up in this time? What can we do as the citizenry and people who live in this nation and around the world to compel our leaders into a place of moral clarity and moral, and using their moral power to help curtail militarism?
Well, thank you so much. I am so grateful to be one among 2 billion people in the world right now across the globe, prepared to celebrate the risen Savior, prepared to celebrate the one who brought light into darkness and caused us to do the same. So I start, as Dr. King did in his message of 59 years ago, I start with the image of God in every person, including my enemy, the Imago Dei. If I don't start there, then I get to be arrogantly deciding who is worthy, who is valuable, who has the ability to live or die. And that is not what human dignity is all about. 5,000 human lives are being lost in an unholy, unauthorized war right now. We think 13 lives. No, 5,000 lives. Half Lebanese, half Iranians, including children in a school, 13 Americans, including the ones who may be missing. These are people created in the image of God. They're not cannon fodder for someone's military industrial complex. And so what I spend every day of the year, literally, praying for leaders by name with a number of people around the country. It's been over 30 years now, sending scriptures to half the Congress every day, reminding them, since 87% say they're followers of Jesus, then I'm reminding them of what Jesus said about caring for the widow, the orphan. The fact that military money is now keeping child care from being funded while we are killing children with military. The contradictions are so serious, but so I spent a lot of time praying for leaders, going up on the Hill, because I think you have to say that the role of the prophet, the role of the prophetic leader ought to be speaking truth to power. You can't speak truth to power if you don't speak to people. You have to build a relationship. So I believe that that's what Dr. King did. I believe that's what Jesus did. And that's what I also did.
Thank you for that. That's very important. Our ability to say we should be before people who generally now in these times of just distinct division, people are saying who they won't talk to. And what you just reminded us of, Dr. William Skinner, is if we won't talk to people, we can't compel people to do anything, and certainly can't work together, and can't see the divinity in each other.
This is not a suggestion. This is not an option. It says in the Word of God in 1 Timothy, first of all, pray for leaders that there'll be peace in the land. We're getting the level of peace related to our prayers. I believe that we think that because someone is doing wrong or evil, we can decide they're not worthy in their humanity of being lifted up. You realize that I was an agnostic for 40 years before I accepted Jesus. I was almost 40. Somebody had to keep praying for me when I was denying Jesus, even though I had a praying mother. That's what I remember.
Thank you. Reverend Barbara, what Dr. Skinner is saying, William Skinner said, reminds me of your work with Moral Mondays and this banner that you're marching and building this movement under right now. War is not holy. And I wonder, You know, as I've been thinking, every time I think about that theme, I think that's so important for people to know who are calling something a holy war. Even as we pray for our leaders, we have to share power with them as we're share power, speak truth to power with them as we're praying for them. And why is it important to convey the disconnect between God and war, to really get that across, not just to leaders, to politicians, but to people across the world, particularly as so much seems to be infused with Christian nationalism? That's Why do you think you have to get war is holy? War is not holy out there.
Yeah. Well, let me thank you so much for that question. Last Monday in 16 states and in Canada, clergy and impacted people decided it was time to launch Moral Monday. Now, when we first launched it in North Carolina, it lasted for 2 years. Moral Monday is a specific kind of protest. It's only for those who believe that the issue is so grave. If we don't challenge it, we forfeit our claim of being people of faith. And it doesn't matter how many people come out. It's almost like A.J. Musty when he held that candle up, Bernice, and somebody asked him, "There's only one of you holding the candle up. Do you think that's going to change anything?" He said, "It changes me first and keeps me from submitting. And then somebody else is going to see that light. And the candle is the only light that every time you share it, it doesn't diminish the light that was shared. You'll notice that. If you share light from a candle, light another candle, the candle you hold doesn't diminish, but the candle gets brighter. And we said it's time. And somebody said to me last week in DC, you know, everybody that's ever stood up and connected war and poverty didn't fare well. And I said, what does that mean? I mean, we're going into Holy Week. And so somebody else said, well, Rabbi, we'll come, but can we wait for another week because we got to celebrate Easter? And I said, how do you celebrate Easter and not stand against war? Do you know what the original Easter was about? It was about the empire standing against nonviolence. It was about Rome. I mean, the first convert was one of the people that nailed Jesus to the cross. He didn't even call Jesus the Son of God until he heard Jesus preaching from the cross. It was a centurion. And so, as one theologian says, our prayer is what we do in private. Our exorcism is what we do in public. We have to pray and exorcise the demons. If you read Luke's gospel, it's right after the Lord's Prayer that Jesus does the exorcism of demons that have so captivated the house that they're 7 times stronger than they were before. So it's the Lord's Prayer and the exorcising of the demons that get him killed. That was the uniqueness of, and not only get him killed, but gets the witness for it. So in this moment, we have to say things like, war is unholy, not just this war.
Correct.
Not just this war, because there are 156 wars going on right now, 130. 56 active state-based wars right now. Right now. It can't just be this war is unholy. It's the concept of war itself. And when you take militarism and poverty and racism, then you add to that the denial of healthcare, the war economy, the false moral narrative, religious nationalism, and ecological devastation, we have now this almost quadrilateral of evil, if you will, that keeps expanding. And the warmongering and the war machinery, I'll talk later on about the cost. I want to give you some very specific numbers. But when we see war, and if we look at this closely, we really are watching a war on divinity. See, every war is a war on divinity. Every war is where somebody decides they have a right to who lives and who dies. And if you think about it, this week in America alone has been one of the most unholy weeks. Unholy, because we had
in the Holy Week.
We have 2 major attacks. I mean, more, but at least 2. One, an unholy war that's a war of choice, has nothing to do with need, even if there was need. I mean, it's just totally just wrong. And then you have people saying they want to decide who gets citizenship. So you have a war on the babies while we're also killing babies. That's a demon. And that's a political demon. That's what Walter Wink said. Demons was the way of the ancient world talking about out of control political power. It wasn't just talking about a spirit. It was talking about the spirit of war, the spirit of evil. And so in this moment, the question you started with at the beginning was, we have to really decide in this moment, will we be on the side of the demons or will we be on the side of sweeping the demons out? You know, Jesus said in Luke, somebody got to get a broom because there's some deep cleaning that's going on. And part of the reason he said the demons still exist is because we didn't clean them out all before. Mm-hmm. and so it returns, right? So we've had war before, but now we got war with an 80-year-old almost child who said, if you don't give me my way, I'll kill civilians, right? And just add to the ongoing 130 wars. And so war itself is unholy, and we must challenge this war on divinity, the war on who people. When you look at what's happening with Putin or what's others and current folk, it's almost as though we have people who, like the ancient Caesars, want to be the sons of God. They want to name themselves as the sons of God. And how do Caesars and emperors do that in the world? They do it by controlling the money and controlling the military. And acting as though they have the authority in both places to determine who lives and who dies. And lastly, one of the things, Dr. King, I want to say this to you, that strikes me about that speech, the sermon that your father gave me. My son is born on this day, by the way, on April the 4th, is that he went to great lengths at the beginning to say, I'm a preacher. That's why I'm challenging this way. Not I'm a civil rights leader. He was that. Not I'm a preacher. And I was set on this trajectory from the day that I stood in the pulpit as a pastor. I'm a preacher. And I had to say to one of my friends this week who said to me, well, Doc, we'll be out there, but we got to celebrate Easter first. I said, you what? He said, yeah, I gotta wait because I gotta get through Easter. And I said, my brother, I love you with all in my heart, but I'm gonna pray for you, because if you think that standing up to this war is something you put on hold and somehow celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and the crucifixion, and you don't make the connection, that's part of what's got us in trouble. Is that we don't recognize what's holy and what's unholy. War itself is holy.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Just to insert a question there, because Dr. King said at the beginning of Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, his speech at Riverside Church, where he, exactly 1 year before he was assassinated, talked about the outcomes, the consequences spiritually, financially, in terms of poverty increasing more here in the United States because of the war in Vietnam. As he started that speech, he talked about this term, and I think about it often, the vocation of agony. He said that to speak out against, in a moment where, people are going to come against you, because people came against him for speaking out against the Vietnam War. And in fact, even Mrs. King encouraged him, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, saying, you have to speak out against this. And his conscience was already compelling him to do that. And so in that speech, he said, this is a vocation of agony, yet we still must speak. And I want us to think about that question, and the audience, those tuning in, to think about that term. Why must we still speak? Because this is not just about leaders speaking or activists speaking, but each one of us, no matter where we are in our own way, can decide a way in which we speak about global militarism, that if it's our faith compelling us to do it, we can exercise our moral power. We all have that, to speak against this blight of militarism, which increases racism, or as a result of racism, and then increases poverty. It all those triple evils work together. Just want you to, I don't know if it's even a question, but it's just commenting on the power of that phrase, the vocation of agony, choosing not to be silent, and however you speak up, whatever you do, even if it's speaking up in your actions, realizing that everybody won't agree. But as your father said, Dr. King, you often talk about this when he was interviewed. And I wonder if you'll mention that more in this moment. When somebody asked him about even the president disagreeing with him or him get on the bad side of the president, what was his response to that about his conscience?
Yeah, that was Mike Douglas, I believe. When he asked him the question about whether he was concerned about being at odds, in other words, with President Johnson. And he essentially said that's not what concerns him. What concerns him is that he not be at odds with what's right, what's just, and what his conscience tells him truth. That he'd rather be basically in alignment with his conscience than to be concerned about what folks may think about where he stands. I think the power of his leadership, and I think this is what is needed today when we go back to Shane talking about courage, is leaders who are congruent and who are not concerned with popularity. Leaders who have weighed and counted the cost, Reverend Barber, and understand that as Jesus called us, we have to deny ourselves and take up that cross and follow him. We have to be willing to be crucified, to be misunderstood, to be maligned, which all of that, I tell people all the time, cancel culture started when my father spoke out against the war in Vietnam, because everybody literally counseled him. Yet he spoke because he understood what Dr. Skinner said when we started at the beginning, that these, and I'm glad you mentioned it earlier about innocent. I always struggle when people talk about innocent lives. I mean, who are we to determine the innocence of a life when God has stamped himself in every human being, even those that we call or that are being adversarial enemies? Because we know it's the will of the Father that none perish. And so we always, as people of faith, as ministers of the gospel of Jesus Christ, we always have to provide room for redemption and restoration and calling people into the faith. And so part of that is ensuring that we are in alignment, that internally we have peace. You know, it's kind of hard to speak about peace outwardly if you are agonized within, and that was the battle with my father. You know, he always wanted to make sure that whatever he did outwardly, he was consistent inwardly. And so, you know, not having peace within, he could not think of or fathom, you know, being silent and segregating his conscience, that he said. You know, he fought against segregation, and now I'm going to compartmentalize when the same issues that I've been fighting. This is all about the sacredness of human life, the dignity of human life. I have to speak, and I have to be consistent with that.
I want to ask too.
Yeah, I say, Dr. Westman, add one little piece.
Yeah.
As we were preparing for this, I went back and read the sermon. I'm sorry, I call it a sermon speech. He was on the floor at Riverside. And as I listen to people that will challenge us who are challenging the unholiness of war, they'll say something like, well, but you're not standing with Iran, are you? Why would you stand with Iran? They miss it. And Dr. King answered that up front in the first, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 paragraphs before he said, listen, I'm not overlooking the ambiguity of the total situation. nor am I trying to make North Korea a paragon of virtue. He said, but I'm talking to my nation now. I'm talking to my nation that has made these claims, great claims. What did he call it? Bernice? The high pressure of creeds and the anemia of need. He made these great claims. And I'm speaking as a preacher in my country. I'm not suggesting that there are some problems, but he also did something else that I think I'm trying to get better at, and I think all of us have to get better at, is that then he went into the history of how we got there. So that he wouldn't allow folk to say, well, just start with the conflict in Vietnam. He went all the way back to the 40s and he said, these things happen, and for 9 years, he talked about 1945, he said, we denied the people of Vietnam the right of independence. He wouldn't allow America to act as though there was his clean hands. And then we got in this war. He took us back in the history. And that's what part of what I think made it so dangerous and cutting. But we have to do that too. We have to make sure we just don't start with, for instance, us hitting Iran today. There's a history.
Yeah.
There's a history of us supporting and helping put people like Saddam and others on the power throne. And then when they don't do what we want, then we want to come in and eradicate them or destroy them. There's a history in Venezuela. There's a history in Haiti where we were too often, as Dr. King said, on the wrong side. And he said, and the people watched us claim on the one hand to be for democracy and independence, but then on the other hand, support some of the most vicious rulers of the day. And then you get to the war in Vietnam, or then we get to what's happening in Iran.
Yeah. I wonder, Reverend Barbara and everyone, why do we segregate our morals? As you talk about that, Reverend Barbara, I want to ask you, Shane, and Dr. William Skinner, where does that come from? Because I have some thoughts about it, but I do think that's something we should ponder as people of faith. If there's anything in me that thinks it's okay for a certain group of people to perish, like I could be talking to someone and we just talking, and they'll say to me, yeah, we really gotta help immigrants. Yeah, you know, power. Yeah. Let's do it. And then I'll say, yeah, did you know about what's happening in Sudan and Congo? Yeah, I didn't know about that. Let's help too. Then I'll say, yeah. We gotta stop this harm that's happening to Palestinians. Wall.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
I have the question, Shane, how are we segregating our morals? That it's okay. We want to help some people not die. But then there's people in Gaza, or there are people in Iran, or there are people for some in the Congo, in Sudan, in different places where their perishing is not as critical to us. What is it that's causing us, as we talk about faith and moral power and the crisis of global militarism, what makes people segregate their morals? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think Dr. King, two things he does a lot of things well in that Riverside speech, but two of the things that stand out and related to your question, Dr. West, is one of them is that he challenges the myth of American exceptionalism, right? This idea that that we're God's messianic force in the world, that this is a battle against pure good, against pure, a pure good against evil. And I think anytime, it's wild right now that there are folks that have a theology that is justifying the loss of tens of thousands of lives. And no one kills with more passion than when they believe that God is on their side.
God is on their side.
Every religion has been twisted in order to justify and camouflage violence and hatred. So I think we've got to name it as demonic, but we have a cure to it, which is Jesus. I mean, one of the most radical commands is, as cliche and shallow that it became in evangelicalism when I grew up, being born again. I think it's one of the most radical ideas in the world, that what's born of the flesh is flesh, but we have a spiritual vision that a child in Iran is just as precious and made in the image of God as a child in New York or Philly. My little baby, Eli, 2 years old, is just as precious and no more precious than the children of Gaza. That idea that Jesus didn't say God so loved America, but God so loved the world, it changes everything, right? Because if we can't say Palestinian lives are precious and sacred, that every child in Iran is made in the image of God, if we can't start there, then there's something wrong with our theology. And I think this invitation to be born again is exactly what's at the heart of the beloved community, right? This vision that we're all interconnected around the world, every single person made in the image of God. But it also means we rebuke what Dr. King did, this notion that America, rather than Jesus, is God's divine messianic hand in the world, that we're sort of God's hand. What Christian nationalism does is it begins to replace Jesus with America, and that's idolatry, and it's deadly, because America. I mean, we are, when Dr. King says we're the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, we have the capacity of 50,000 Hiroshima bombs in our nuclear arsenal. And we are the only country that has ever dropped nuclear weapons on people. And we did it twice in 1 week. So we got some real heart work to do if we are going to be the kind of people that God wants us to be. So it's a great pretension to say that we are some exceptional messianic force in the world, and Dr. King calls it out so beautifully and calls us to see the humanity in those that we would deem as less than human or enemy.
You said something. I was just coming to you, Dr. Skinner. If you could, as you say what you're about to say, would you also talk about Shane mentioned heart work, and I wanted to ask you, what does that include? As we think about heart work.
Yeah, I want to talk about the fact, and I'm going to go back to the simple. Unless I see every person in the divine image, not white, not black, not Asian, not red, not yellow, if I don't see every person that way, then I am going to decide some groups are valuable and some are not. Some nations are more valuable than others. The command to love every neighbor as myself is not the neighbors I pick. It's every neighbor. It's whoever, and the word neighbor actually comes from near dwellers, whoever's around you, whoever's in the world. Okay, so I think that we are, what I loved about the speech more than anything, he humanized the ones we call our enemy. He talked about their culture that was lost, their villages that were lost. He actually saw their pain. And if I don't see the pain in Angola, Somalia, the same way as I see it in Iran, as I see it in Gaza, then I really am at a level of moral corruption. I mean, I really am, because I'm not talking about the teachings of Jesus anymore. I'm making up a gospel. I may be religious, and I may have some tenets of the religion called Christianity, but the Bible really basically says that we are not to even judge, that we all have, he says that the word of God says he's looking to and fro throughout the earth, looking whose hearts are inclined to him. That means we have some inner work to do. I love the fact that Dr. King was thinking about a little bit more about when he talked about how can I counsel Black urban kids about their violence.
That's right.
The ultimate
Vietnam War,
teachers' war. He's actually questioning, he's actually reflecting. We've got to do more self-reflection on where am I? Where am I in loving neighbors right here? Loving Black neighbors and white neighbors. In other words, I think there's so much judgment in us that love is cut off. The capacity to love is cut off. And so right now we have a faith-based leadership that is more committed to naming the categories of people of value. That's not Jesus. And it's like going to the White House and lying to the president that he is like Jesus. And it's like, we have to tell the truth. We have to be truth tellers. Truth tellers is that every life matters. You know, white people used to get upset when we talked about Black Lives Matter. Why do we say Black Lives Matter? Because they didn't. Because they did not, right? So now what we're saying, we can honestly say the word of God has taught us that all lives matter. So I think my self-examination for me is always, do all lives matter to me?
Dr. West.
Dr. West.
No, go ahead, Dr. King. Go ahead, Dr. King.
Yeah, mine is just really just a small bit of a statement. I think this conversation that's being had tonight is a conversation that needs to be had on a consistent basis across faith communities. The problem is the way we're talking tonight is foreign in most faith communities and churches. We're not teaching this to the young, so they segregate because early on, how many times did we hear, you know, strong teachings and sermons around everyone being created in the image and after the likeness of God?
Not often.
I mean, not often at all. How often do we spend on the greatest commandments? You know, one sermon here, but how come we don't go deep into that and make sure that it's presented even to the youngest of ears? You know, how often we talk about the new commandment I give you that transcends to me even the first two, which is now that we have these two great commandments, I've now shown you the way of this love. So like I love, that's the new commandment. So I just wanted to slip that in because we're segregating because we have not been exposed, taught, and saturated in what we are saying tonight.
And Dr. West.
I just want to highlight one moment. I just want to be sure, sir, that people know that the King Center, we create the beloved community. And love your neighbor and love God. That's a key core concept within all the major religions. And somehow across faiths, we've gotten off track. But that's a key core concept that you have to love people, and neighbor is not just proximate, but it's neighbors around the world, this love concept. And so we want to be sure, no matter who's watching, that we recognize that we can create this beloved community, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that our love has to extend beyond our family and those we agree with into a neighbor. And Jesus said, neighbor is determined by who I'm neighborly to, not by the person, but do I treat you like you're my neighbor? Reverend Barber.
Dr. Richard Lisher, who wrote a book called The Preacher King, goes to great lengths to say what got Dr. King killed was not love, calling us to love. He was challenging us to love in the wrong places. In other words, he didn't limit it to just your family, your brother. The king. He dared to go into the Congress and say, how does this bill reflect the love? Y'all claim you love, you put your hand on your Bible, but how does this law of segregation reflect love? And that question, remember, because love without power is weak and anemic. Power without love is harsh and brutal. And it's how do we wrestle? And I think what Dr. Bernice just said a minute ago, I just want to slip a few things in too. When you name something a demon, the reason you name a demon because you're not saying the person inhabited by the demon is destroyed. You know what he said to Peter was, you know, get behind me, Satan, not get behind me, Peter. But you have to name the demons. War, like in the Bible. What is your name? My name is Legions. It was this man saying, I've been run crazy by the empire. The demons of war are so deep in me that the only place that makes sense for me is a graveyard. But then the question is, why did the people throw him in the graveyard? If he wasn't a demonic field before the graveyard, he was surely after. My point I'm making is that the Pew Foundation did a study a few years ago and said that what Jesus preached in his first sermon, Luke chapter 4, registered 0.2% of all the sermons preached in pulpit. It didn't even register 1%. So what's happening is we are having, and this is something Dr. King understood, I think, when he says that you have to have public liturgy because folk are not getting it inside, right? So I know yesterday I wrestled with, I said to some folk, why aren't we having our Good Friday services out in public? Why are all of them still quarantined in the sanctuary? Because we had everybody in there confessing, and most of the folk in there were not the ones doing injustice. We were like, we confess our injustice, oh Lord. Actually, most of the people that were sitting in the church I was in, they aren't the one. And I'm not saying we're sinless, but we're not out there pushing buttons for war and whatnot. And we were confessing the very things that actually we needed more like an Isaiah confession. Isaiah 6, when he says, Lord, I'm a sinner and I live in the midst of an public liturgy. So after Riverside, Dr. King doesn't leave it right to a sermon. He starts a movement, right? Public liturgy. Because public liturgy is the only way you can exorcise demons. You pray to get the power to do it, right? And then you have to engage in public liturgy. March on Washington, Birmingham, Montgomery, Poor People's Campaign, all these things, forms of public liturgy to force folk to hear love, to see what it looks like, to see black and white and brown together, to give them the first goal, and I'll stop here, the first goal of a prophet is not prophetic implementation. The first goal of a prophet or prophetic voices is to allow people to question the things they have given allegiance to. That allows them, it's prophetic imagination that gives people a freedom to reimagine their existence, even if that existence is acceptance, of which why finally I love when Mother Coretta stands in solidarity, and I read it and listen to her singing, "Come by here, my Lord." She starts, "Come by here, my Lord." But then she, in the face of all the violence that she had faced, she says, listen, violence is more than that. Violence is not denied for education. Violence is, but then that last line, apathy and a refusal to address. If I rephrase that, the refusal to engage in public liturgy that makes what Sister Skinner said, the people who need to hear it come in, have to face it, and what Bernice said, have to face it and hear it. That too is a form of violence because we quarantine what must be public if we have any hope of transforming.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, we have 15 more minutes, and it's unbelievable to me. I'm gonna tell y'all, I'm not gonna agree to lead no more of these conversations on these topics for
it's Shane's fault.
15 minutes. We got at least 3 more hours of stuff in us. I'm so serious. As Dr. King says, we don't often talk about this. I think that if we spent like inviting faith leaders to half-day summits on this topic and continue to talk about it, how do we cultivate in ourselves moral power? And how does our faith fuel that moral power? I think as we consider this docuseries coming out about Dr. King's faith, When Faith Calls, we're reminded, that our faith fuels our moral power. Before I go to the last question for each of you, just want to highlight for the audience and encourage you to read, those who are tuning in, A Time to Break Silence. There's a compilation of Dr. King's writings called A Time to Break Silence for students. Now, don't be thinking it's for students, so it's for young folks, but it's actually a great tool because it gives you some study questions at the end of each writing or speech. And I want to encourage you to get that A Time to Break Silence compilation and look at Dr. King's words about militarism and about the war in Vietnam, and think about how it's still applicable today, how relevant it is. Because I want us to answer one question as we go out about something he said, but we need to remember too, militarism as a system, but also Dr. King said it's a path to spiritual death, and that's paraphrasing. Think about the course that we're on as a nation and world, the more we cultivate militarism versus true peace. And then just the deeper issues, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner mentioned this earlier, of being a nation where our leader has said, we don't have federal money for daycare because we're fighting wars. we're fighting wars. And that speaks, I think, to the spiritual condition of our nation and of our world. But I want to close with this because Dr. King he said in A Time to Break Silence, he talked about this revolution that we need, a revolution of values. And I want to ask us each to share, you each to share an action item. How does just a person at home right now do something, just one initial thing if they're just getting started, to be a part of a revolution of values and to start to have more moral clarity and courage to speak out and act out about an issue that's important to them, particularly if it's fueled by their faith? What can faith, let me clarify the question. Y'all looking at me like that's a lot of questions. What can faith fuel people to do in this moment, and how do they get started?
So can I just connect back to what Dr. Barber said so beautifully in connection to what Dr. King said about love? What we're saying is that love is faith in action, and that the action is the evidence of love. It is not the syrupy Hollywood kind of love. We're talking about seeing the child ill and doing something. It's about caring for a neighbor. What can people do? So the Bible talks a lot in 600 passages about prayer. And the reason I say that is because the church is not praying today. So we are acting, we are resisting, we're speaking, and we're preaching. But if we added, even the person sitting at home in faith could just pray against militarism, pray for leaders who are committed to nonviolence. I mean, I think it starts with each person. Most people are overwhelmed because they think we're asking them to go and organize 2,000 people. I'm saying, sitting at home right now, you can't, if you agree with anything that was said today, that war is unholy, that it's hurting our children, it's hurting our future, it's hurting the marginalized, it is moral rot in our nation. If you believe that, then go to the scriptures and just pray the word of God about that. Pray against for leaders to be raised up in the coming election. That's very practical. In the coming election, who are committed to nonviolence, who are agents of peace, like the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. Start there. That's something to do before you ever leave your house.
Thank you. So we're making a list, everybody, if you're tuning in. Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner said prayer. Now Shane's going to give us another item.
Oh, well, I believe in prayer with all my heart, and I love Dr. Skinner, and I pray with all my heart right now. And I also think we have to name the fact that prayer can be a place to hide. Like the politicians and preachers after every mass shooting that say we offer thoughts and prayers while refusing to take action. And these are not binaries. We can be people of prayer and people of action. We have to be both. But, as Miroslav Volf says, it must offend God when we ask God to do things that God has given us the power to do. And so I think of one of my mentors that said, when you ask God to move a mountain, God might give you a shovel. So I want to just offer, I think right now we need to put prayer into action. Part of what is moving when we turn guns into garden tools like this, this is a shovel, 100% made out of a gun. The wood's from the wood of the gun. The tool is from the metal. And every time we do it, we are declaring that all things can be made new. And what's true of metal is also true of public policies. They can change. And human hearts, people can change. So I think we've got to believe in that change. And then we've got to organize. Because Dr. King said those of us who love peace have got to learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. And this month, we're launching a new initiative that's a big, in the words of Dr. Barber, it's a big fusion organizing, but it's called the National Peacemaker Association. Got the mug here, the NPA. And Dr. King, we've emailed you and Dr. West to see if you'll be on the advisory board for it. But we've got to organize for peace. We got to be willing to risk our lives with the same courage that people have been willing to risk their lives for war. We've got to mobilize people power and resources for the sake of peacemaking and train ourselves with the nonviolence of the Dr. King and the principles. So that's why we built this 3-story, peacemaker space in Philly. And we invite everybody to come out. We're going to be teaming up every chance we get with you, Dr. King and Dr. West. So we just need to realize that we've got more power together than we do on our own, and we need each other. So that's why we're launching the NPA right now to try to organize around all the intersections of peacemaking, militarism and gun violence, everything that's crushing the image of God.
So Dr. West, beyond praying, we are organizing 2,000 pole chaplain and peacekeepers in 9 states.
I don't y'all take up all the time because they're supposed to go one at a time with each person. So now, wait a minute. Now, if we're going to be peaceful, let her come to me, and then you can respond to him. And then you're not going to let it be the time has run out. So it's my turn now. Thank you very much. One of the things, yeah, we're not going to go debate. We on the same team, and we don't have to fill out each of our stuff. She said, so one of the things, I think it's a multiple oneness. In a week, we're having a national conference on what are the moral issues of this moment, for political moment, election. And we're putting impacted people, scholars, and biblicists in the same room. I'm opening this discussion with how do you keep your sanity in an insane world? And looking at this notion of demonism through the eyes of the gospel and the movie Sinners, and raising the question, what did we do to invite this in? We got to own that. In that movie, it says they don't get in unless you invite them in. And then we kind of get a sense of then what must we do? What kind of deep cleaning, what kind of brooms do we need, as the scripture says, to exercise that out? But it's also as a part of that, Moral Mondays are happening across the country, and I want to invite people. We're inviting clergy, we're inviting impacted people, we're inviting veterans who've been in war and recognize the craziness of it and have become some of the greatest peace leaders. We're inviting children, Iranian children and others, to stand simultaneously every Monday at 12, now in 16 states in the District of Columbia and Canada, because we have to have public liturgy. And I want to invite people to do that. And then finally, I love what Dr. Skinner says about and Shane too, about everybody having a voice. And I don't trust an activist that doesn't have a deep as prayer life, spiritual life, worship life, and social justice life. I think it's a trinity. You have to have a prophetic social consciousness, holiness, and spirituality. And the 3 of those unite, because if you don't have you got the spirituality without the other 2, you end up having a party. If you've got the holiness without the other 2, you've been sectarian. If you've got prophetic social consciousness without holiness, spirituality, you're going to burn out. You just are. You might end up becoming what you fight against because you don't have the spiritual reserve to resist. And you don't mess with demons if you don't have the spiritual reserve to resist. So all 3 of them, kind of like the 3 of us, what Dr. Skinner said, what Shane said, what I'm trying to say, it comes together. And in this moment, we have to find ways to not even just go along with where people say this is a challenge about democracy. We're in a war. We're in a threat of civilization itself. I want us to go back to what Dr. King said to us at first. That Dr. King said in this speech, non-existent, non-violence or non-existent. I close with this, Bernice. I close with this, Dr. West and Skip. I woke up crying this morning because my son was born today. His name is Andrew. And when he was 1 year old, I was holding him in the bed when the buildings were falling down. When September 11th happened, I thought it was somebody playing a cruel joke. And I was holding him and I started saying, what did I do to have a baby in a time? Because I didn't know what was happening. Was it a country? Was it we at war? I knew we were in Goldsboro, and by where I live, we were slated to be hit because we have the Air Force base there that actually responds to what happens in DC. And then I woke up this morning and it dawned on me that now he's 20 some years old and we still in war.
Still in.
And I ask myself, have I done enough? Have we done enough? Because when he was born, I was holding him in war. And now he's 20-something years old. And I'm holding him in war. And all of us have got to get that, not just on the internet here, but into the public sphere. Do you all realize what's happening? And not just wake up, because people say you got to be woke, but you can be woke and still be in bed. Rise up, not just wake up. Rise up non-violently. Turn on every love faucet you got in your spirit, in your soul, in your walking, in your talking. Because if we don't raise up a banner, the Bible says when the enemy comes like a flood, we become the standard. And I don't want to be crying another 10 years, because I might not be crying because the world may be no more. That's how serious this is. Mm-hmm. And we got to act like it in every sermon, in every prayer, in every protest. That's how serious it is.
Thank you.
Non-violence or non-existence.
I want to, for the audience, thank you. Before we go to Dr. King, just because I think people are out there looking for solutions for what they can do. So I want to summarize a bit what you've shared so far, and then go to Dr. King for our closing answer. That we talked about prayer. Prayer is real. Whenever I see folks say, in response to thoughts and prayers, y'all better stop that praying. I'm like, no, don't stop the praying. No. Just pair the praying with some with some action. As Rabbi Abraham Heschel said, he said he prayed with his feet. And so he understood that I'm gonna pray, but as I'm praying, I'm going out there to be a part of something. What happens is sometimes we don't pray and wait for strategy, and sometimes some of these moments require some strategy. Shane, you have that, what you're doing. Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, Dr. King, Reverend Barbara, you have that. So we had to add some work to our faith and prayer. Scripture says faith without work is dead. And so as we talk about faith, moral power, and the crisis of global militarism, we're talking about pairing that faith to fuel moral power. We have to collaborate to organize. So if you're out there and you're right now you're saying, what do I do? Find somebody in your community or in the nation who is already working on that thing that's important to you. You have some folks here who are working on things. You have to be a part of something. You don't have to create something. There are a lot of things that are already happening that you can join in on to be a part of something and lend your skill to a great work. If you're a great fundraiser, if you're a great administrator, we need all of those things. Don't think you got to be the one out there speaking or the one that's out in front marching. Everybody has a part in this. I want to mention training and let you know that nonviolence is a strategy. It's a love-centered approach to social change that starts with you. And we want to invite you to go to the KingCenterInstitute.org because we need training. Be a part of learning. And then Reverend Barbara mentioned what I phrased as learning experiences and spiritual encounters, those spaces where we talk about it and name it. And grow in our knowing about what it is. And as Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner was mentioning, the people that they're training and the things that they're setting up, I just want you to remember, these folks have mentioned a multifaceted approach that I want to highlight. There's a way for you to get into this and help to not just denounce something on social media. Don't just denounce a war. Think about ways that you can really say to our politicians and to our communities, we can't study war no more. I never understood what that song meant in church till I got old. And I said, people said they're not going to study war no more. That's different for me now. So Dr. King, if you would just in your answer, close out our conversation as people come now. I want to encourage you to do the survey that you see on the screen, scan the QR code and complete the survey as we close out. Thank you so much. But Dr. Bernice King.
Well, you took some of the words out of my mouth. but I'm going to emphasize it's okay because sometimes people need to hear things more than one time. I'm going to say first and foremost, it is personal, meaning it does start with each one of us. I remember growing up and my mother constantly saying to us that somebody has to cut off the chain of violence. We have allowed violence to become normalized in our society and in our world. And it's not just them, it's us. So we have to do some sort of personal audit and soul searching and begin to look at ways that we are perpetuating violence, we're feeding into violence. So we've got to starve the violence in our own lives, meaning we got to fuse the glorification of violence in our language. That's very hard for most people. I understand. We got to refuse it in our entertainment, and that's extremely hard. I used to love action movies because you talked, I think earlier, Dr. Skinner, I don't know if it was you who said, what did we do to invite it in? What are we doing to continue to invite that spirit into our society and the world? We think it's normal and it's okay to have as entertainment these violent movies and entertainment. So we're giving permission to the demons, Reverend Barbara, to be in our society and our world and to spread and to grow. And we not even notice it because we have become so wedded to this way of life. And so we have to begin to practice the starvation. And as you said, Dr. West, study war no more. We do have to begin a serious, and when I say serious, I have one note now, like the Apostle John who said, repent for the kingdom is at hand. You know, that means change your mind, change your direction, change your thinking. My one note is please study nonviolence. Dr. King said it to us with urgency in 1964. We're now at what? How many years now? 62 years 62. Since that time. Is that right?
62.
62?
That's right.
62 years. He said in his Nobel Peace Prize lecture, I suggest that the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence immediately become a subject of study and serious experimentation in every field of human conflict, by no means, and this is key, excluding relations between nations. This nonviolence is for everyone under the sound of my voice. It is a way of life, and until we embrace it as such, till we understand it, that it's not just in the social justice arena, but when we get it right personally, and when we understand how it gives you the discipline, the courage, the emotional regulation, when it gives you the strategy to be able to deal with conflict and to deal with injustice and inequity in a way that honors the dignity and value and worth of every human life, we will no longer see the manifestation of war. And it is difficult, but we can do it. It goes back to what we said earlier. We still have a choice. Nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. And I'm gonna say this again, because Daddy said it, and it's real today. This may well be our last chance.
That's right.
To choose chaos or community. And nonviolence is the pathway to community.
Amen.
So much. Thank you to each of you for joining us. To everyone who tuned in, there's some things going across the ticker right now. Dr. Bernice A. King mentions nonviolence. Study more about nonviolence at www.thekingcenter.org, more specifically, thekingcenterinstitute.org. Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner was sharing about an event that she has coming up that you can find out more about at turnoutsunday.com. It's a Pole Chaplain Peacekeeper Know Your Rights De-escalation training on April 13th from 7 to 8:15 p.m. Listen, you can go find out more about Red Letter Christians. That's the organization that our brother Shane Claiborne leads, and then repairsofthebreach.org. And even Google, find out more about Moral Mondays with Reverend Barbara. But we want you to learn more even about the organizations that were mentioned here this evening and today, no matter where you are in the world today. Follow us, Shane said, at redletterchristians.org. We just want to encourage you to be engaged and be a part. We want to have a conversation that would lead you into a course of action. And again, we're grateful for your time here with us in this beloved community talk presented by our Better Together Faith Initiative at the King Center. And we want to encourage you to just keep studying, keep learning, keep growing, choose nonviolence, and let your faith, any faith that you have that's connected to love, connected to divinity, let it fuel your moral power so that you can be a part of addressing this crisis of global militarism. Thank you.